Tonight, we are going to travel back to the 15th century kingdom of Ayutthaya, what is now Thailand. We will drop you straight into the heart of a dense, humid jungle. To be honest, in that environment, you probably would not survive even your first day. But tonight, not only will you survive, you are also about to have a stroke of luck so unbelievable, even a little frightening. So before you settle in and relax, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. Of course, that is only if you genuinely enjoy the content I make. Alright, now dim the lights, maybe switch on a fan, listen to that soft ambient hum in the background, and let us slowly enter tonight's journey together. You are an utterly ordinary villager, and today's work is the same as usual. Going to the dense woods on the outskirts of the village to gather mushrooms and wild greens. The air is as thick as syrup, clinging tightly to your skin. The sunlight overhead is filtered by the vast canopy into countless shifting flecks of light, dancing over the damp ferns. Invisible insects perform a monotonous hypnotic symphony in your ears. And now and then, from far away, comes the cry of a gibbon high in the trees. Step by step you tread on rotting leaves and mud, feeling as though the soles of your shoes are about to be sucked into the earth itself. Everything is no different from yesterday, the day before, or the day before that. But today, in chasing a brightly colored beetle, you wander a little deeper than usual. By the time you come to your senses, the scenery around you has become somewhat unfamiliar. In the jungle, that is common enough. A little getting lost is not much of a problem. You steady yourself and prepare to retrace your steps by memory. Just then, you turn past a stand of banana trees taller than you are, and the space ahead suddenly opens up. There, in front of you, is a small clearing you do not recognize. Strangely, there is no sound here. The insect buzz and bird song that had filled the air a moment ago have vanished completely. The air seems frozen, and even the wind appears to be holding its breath. And then you see it. It stands in the middle of the clearing, quietly curling tender leaves with its trunk. This is not an ordinary Asian elephant. Its skin is an unusual pale shade, not a sickly chalk white, but a grayish white with a soft pink undertone, like the finest clay, weathered and washed by rain for 1,000 years. Sunlight falls across its body and reflects a warm, sacred radiance. You can even make out its pale eyelashes and toenails as lustrous and white as pearls. Your heart is suddenly seized by an invisible hand, and your breath catches in your throat. You are not afraid, not exactly. It is something harder to name. A shock compounded of awe and terror. Of course you know what this is. Everyone who grew up in the kingdom of Ayutthaya has heard the story of Queen Maya dreaming of a 6-tusked white elephant descending into her womb, and thereby conceiving the Buddha. A white elephant is the embodiment of the sacred, the ultimate symbol of the king's legitimate rule, an auspicious blessing bestowed by heaven upon the entire kingdom. It seems to sense your presence and stops what it is doing. Slowly, it turns its head. Its eyes are wiser and calmer than those of any animal you have ever seen, more than any human beings. Even, it simply looks at you quietly. There is no hostility in that gaze, but no welcome either, only a pure, equal regard. And in that instant, you realize something with absolute clarity. Your life, your small, ordinary life of gathering mushrooms, your own little days that belonged only to you, has ended completely. From the second you saw it, your identity was changed forever. You are no longer just someone from some village. Your new name is now the one who found the white elephant. Of course, at this moment, you still cannot fully understand what that means. You only instinctively feel that you have stumbled into a miracle too vast for your mind to grasp. But is that miracle a blessing or a curse? Even now, Some historians still argue over whether such discoveries were truly pure luck, or carefully staged political performances arranged by certain kings to consolidate their power. But for you, that question is meaningless. You know only one thing. You have to do something. Your mind is blank. The only thought in it is run. You turn and stumble back into the jungle, the narrow forest paths that had seemed so familiar only moments ago now feel like a labyrinth full of unknown dangers. Roots trip you, vines lash your face, but you feel no pain at all. You just run desperately, your lungs burning like broken bellows, your heart hammering madly inside your chest, as though it is about to burst out. The image repeats itself again and again in your mind. That pale skin, that tranquil gaze. At last, tumbling and crawling, you burst from the jungle's edge and see the familiar outline of the village. With the last of your strength, you rush to the entrance and hoarsely shout to a few villagers repairing fishing nets. "The headman, quick! Get the headman!" You are taken before him. He is an elderly man with graying hair and dark skin, his face carved through with the marks of time. Gasping for breath, you spill out the whole story at once. At first, the headman and the elders around him are skeptical. They have seen too many people made delirious by the miasma of the jungle or the blazing sun. But as they look at the naked terror on your face and hear the precise details in your description, their doubt slowly turns to gravity. "Take us there." The headman rises to his feet. His voice is not loud, but it carries weight, so you lead the headman and several of the most respected elders back to the silent clearing. When you part the last screen of leaves, your heart leaps into your throat. You are afraid it was only a hallucination, afraid it will have vanished. But it is still there, just as it was when you left, quiet, serene. Behind you, the elders suck in their breath sharply. The headman steps forward a few paces, his eyes narrowing as he studies the elephant. He does not go too close, he merely observes from a distance. According to the laws of the kingdom, all white elephants belong to the king personally. No commoner may touch or disturb one without authorization. That is common knowledge, etched into everyone's bones. The headman confirms that this is no ordinary elephant with merely somewhat light skin. It truly does match the characteristics of the sacred white elephant of legend, the Chang Fueg. In some places, there are even folk methods said to be used for preliminary verification before royal experts arrive, such as a sugarcane test. Different kinds of cane are set out, and whichever stalk the elephant chooses is read as an omen. Though that is more a matter of popular belief than formal doctrine, it is enough to show how seriously people take this matter. The news spreads through the village like wildfire. Everyone gathers at a distance, craning their necks and watching you, and the elephant, with a mixture of excitement and fear. You realize that your good fortune is no longer yours alone. Like a contagious virus, it has instantly infected the entire village. The headman's wrinkled face is more serious than ever. He knows that this is both the highest honor and an enormous risk. From this moment on, this tiny, insignificant village will be thrust into the spotlight of the entire kingdom. Royal officials will come. Soldiers will come. All the village's resources may be commandeered. The slightest mistake could bring catastrophe upon the whole community. Historians often ask how much autonomy a remote village in that era really had when faced with such a sudden event. Would they gain any practical benefit from this brief glory, or were they from the beginning already trapped in passivity and fear, waiting for royal authority to take full control? Looking at the headman's knitted brow, you feel the latter is more likely. Your personal miracle has already become the collective burden of the entire village. Before long, a royal messenger sent by the regional governor arrives. Her appearance marks the point at which this ceases to be a local curiosity and rises into an event of state importance. She reads out the governor's order. The entire village, you included, is now under the direct command of the royal court. What happens next leaves you dizzy. You thought someone would simply put a rope around the elephant and lead it all the way to the capital. But you are wrong, completely wrong. Escorting a sacred white elephant to Ayutthaya, the capital, is an undertaking of immense scale and solemnity. She cannot simply be taken away. She is to proceed in a grand ceremonial progress. First, a road must be prepared for her. Not just a bit of brush cleared away, but a broad, level avenue, so that every step of the sacred beast is steady and comfortable. Then temporary rest stations and canopies must be built along the way to shield her from wind and rain. An enormous entourage of guards, officials, and attendants rapidly assembles, and your small village becomes crowded in an instant. And in the midst of this chaotic but orderly pageant, you are assigned an entirely new and irreplaceable role. Chief Keeper of the Elephant. The white elephant seems to trust only you. Only when you approach does it appear most at ease. So you now walk at the very center of the procession, right beside it. Your task is to soothe it, feed it the tenderest bananas and the finest sugarcane with your own hands, and speak to it in a gentle voice. In an instant, you have gone from a nobody to a figure held in deep respect within this immense procession. Officials politely ask you after the elephant's condition. Guards clear the way for you, but deep down, you know this is a kind of imprisonment in another form. You are locked into this role. Your daily range of movement is now limited to the few yards around the elephant. The journey is long and monotonous. The procession moves extremely slowly, almost like a traveling ceremony. Whenever it reaches a town or village, local officials and commoners alike kneel by the roadside to receive it. They are not looking at you, nor at the officials. They are worshipping this walking omen of good fortune. You see people fervently collecting the mud from the ground where the elephant has passed, even its dung, believing these things can bring luck and protection. This deep-rooted popular faith gives you a more profound understanding of what this all means. You are seeing the world from an entirely new vantage point. Revered, yet not free. The procession itself is a carefully staged political drama. It displays to all the lords and people of every province along the route the reigning king's unmatched merit and his intimate connection with the divine. You are not escorting an animal. You are playing the lead role in a roving propaganda spectacle. And gradually you begin to realize that perhaps the true purpose of the journey is the procession itself, not the arrival. Of course, the expense required to sustain such a magnificent performance is staggering. Food, manpower, materials, are these costs borne by the royal treasury, or imposed as a kind of religious tax on the villages along the way? Historians have argued over this for years, because the records are often frustratingly vague. But as you look at the villagers kneeling by the roadside, their faces devout yet tinged with hardship, you begin to suspect the answer. After an endless, exhausting journey, you finally see it. The capital, Ayutthaya. The sight steals your dear breath away. Countless golden stupas and towers prangs, and chetas glitter in the afternoon sun like a forest made of gold and flame. On the web of canals, boats of every kind move ceaselessly to and fro. Mighty city walls rise high, enclosing a universe completely unlike your village. This is not merely a large city. This is the center of the world. Your procession passes through the noisy urban districts and heads straight toward the grand palace. The palace buildings are even more awe-inspiring. Their layered roofs covered in glazed tiles, their walls adorned with intricate carvings and gold leaf. In the courtyards, countless courtiers and servants in sumptuous dress are already kneeling on the ground. The entire palace is so still that all you can hear is the fierce flutter of banners in the wind. You are led into the audience hall. The light inside is dim, but the scene before you still leaves you speechless. The lofty ceiling, the massive shadowed pillars, the strange scent of incense and spices in the air. Following instructions, you perform the most respectful prostration. Kowtow, Tetri, Tao, Kowtow. Your whole body lies flat against the cold floor, your forehead pressed tightly to the ground. You have been warned again and again that you must never look directly at the king's face. He is the God King, a divine being on earth, a Chakravartin. A mortal gaze would profane his sacredness. All you can do is catch, from the corner of your eye, the vague figure sitting high upon a 9-tiered canopied throne, wrapped in gold and silk. He seems less like a solid man than a radiance condensed into form. The king speaks. His voice, carried by the excellent acoustics of the hall, sounds majestic and distant. He is not speaking in the everyday language you know, but in a specialized royal register used for communicating with the court. You understand almost none of it. He is not speaking to you. He is proclaiming to the entire court. He declares that the arrival of this white elephant is heaven's affirmation of his benevolent rule and an auspicious sign that the kingdom will enjoy enduring prosperity. You, as the discoverer, are brought forward and made to bow once more. You feel like an insignificant speck of dust, swept into an immense and ancient ritual that you do not and cannot fully understand. You are just a prop, a tool, whose role was to carry a gift from the jungle to the foot of the throne. In your plain village clothes, standing amid a palace full of brilliant silk and jewels, you look painfully out of place. The enormous visual contrast never lets you forget your status. Under the strict sumptuary laws of the time, what people of different classes were allowed to wear and use differed as widely as heaven and earth. Kneeling there, a thought suddenly flashes through your mind. Does this supreme God King truly possess absolute power? Or, as historians have argued, is he in large part constrained by Brahmin priests and immensely powerful noble families? After all, they are the ones who interpret omens and preside over rituals. The meaning of this white elephant is, in the end, defined by them. But the thought passes in an instant. You are soon overwhelmed by the immense pressure radiating from the palace architecture itself. This place is not merely a palace. It is a psychological weapon. Its grand scale, its complex layout, its severe etiquette, everything here is designed to strip visitors of personal will and compel total submission through awe. By forcing you to kneel, by preventing you from looking directly at him, the king continuously reinforces his own divinity. What you have offered him is not merely an elephant. Through a meticulously designed ritual, you have offered up your entire self. After the ceremony, the real reward arrives. A court minister unfurls a splendid royal decree before you and begins to read it aloud in an intoning cadence. Much of it is beyond you, but the looks of envy and jealousy from those around you make one thing perfectly clear. Your life is being transformed beyond recognition. First, you are granted a noble title, perhaps Kun, or perhaps Luang. In an instant, you are made to cross the supposedly uncrossable gulf between commoner and ruling class. Next, the king bestows on you an entirely new name, personally chosen by him. It is an auspicious name, one meant to symbolize your good fortune. Yet you also understand that it is more like a brand burned into your body. From this day forward, you belong to the king. Your old name, together with your former identity, is erased. Then come the material rewards. You are granted broad tracts of fertile rice land, more than you ever dared to imagine in your former life. Under the Sagdina system of Ayutthaya, A person's social rank is directly tied to the quantity of land assigned to him. By awarding you land, the king forcibly inserts you into the kingdom's complex social hierarchy. Beyond that, you are also given a plot of land in the capital, several heavy chests of silver, countless lengths of exquisite silk, and a retinue of servants assigned to attend to you. The wealth feels unreal, like a dream striking you so hard it leaves you dazed. From a half-starved villager you have become, in a single leap, one of the privileged few. But just as you begin to sink into the vast joy of it, a subtle undertone emerges, something that leaves you faintly uneasy. In the decree, or rather in the minister's explanation of it, it is stated, explicitly or implicitly, that all this wealth is being granted so that you can properly and honorably care for the sacred white elephant. Your wealth, from the very beginning, is bound tightly to your responsibility. At that moment, the seed of the white elephant's terrible burden is quietly planted. You think you have been handed a mountain of gold. What you fail to realize is that at the same time, the king has placed in your hands a bottomless pit that must be filled with that mountain. Scholars frequently debate the true nature of such wealth. Did the land you were granted really belong to you, as private property in anything like the modern sense? Or was it more akin to a lifetime commission, with you managing the land on behalf of the crown and drawing income from it? Concepts of land ownership in that era were fundamentally different from ours today. As you look at the heap of rewards before you, a strange feeling slowly rises within you. The king's generosity does not seem entirely benevolent. It feels more like a more sophisticated means of control. This wealth is not cash you can pack up and take away. It is land that must be managed, a title bound up with court duties, servants who may be watching you at every moment. This windfall from heaven is in truth a chain forged of gold, locking you into the capital, into the court, into the king's field of vision. It makes you wholly dependent on his continued favor so that you can perfectly carry out your primary duty, to care for his elephant. The wealth you have received is, in fact, the price of the freedom you have lost. The delirious joy of sudden enrichment has not even fully faded when the first severe trial arrives. You must build a residence for the white elephant worthy of its sacred status. And it is here that the apparently limitless fortune you have been given first reveals its scorching side. You are told that you cannot simply throw up a shed. An architect from the court is dispatched to assist you. Courteously, he unfurls a set of designs before you, and you are stunned. That is not an elephant stable. It is a small palace. The building in the drawings has delicately arched eaves, soaring columns, and a special bathing pool just for the elephant. In the most matter-of-fact tone imaginable, the architect begins listing the required materials. The columns must be of the finest hardwood, carved with intricate patterns. The walls must be coated with multiple layers of costly vermilion lacquer. The roof must be adorned with gold leaf. The interior must be hung with silk draperies from distant lands. As you listen, your palms begin to sweat. Any one of these materials would have cost your old village years of labor. And now you are expected to use them to build an elephant house. You become the project manager of this enormous undertaking. You must personally procure the materials, or rather, procure them through your equally inexperienced steward. You must hire the best craftsmen in the city and supervise the entire construction process. You quickly discover that managing a building site is 10,000 times more complicated than gathering mushrooms in the jungle. The craftsmen argue over wages, suppliers extort you by raising prices, and you must ensure that every detail is perfect, because you know very well that the whole court, including the king himself, is watching you. Every coin you spend is a display of your loyalty and competence before the royal court. The heavy chests of silver are diminishing before your eyes. Historically, Royal white elephants really did have their own dedicated pavilions and quarters, usually built near the palace. Their living conditions were regarded as a direct reflection of the king's piety and of the kingdom's strength. Some of these elephant quarters even had mattresses made of velvet or silk laid out for the animals, so that the sacred beasts would not have to lie on the cold ground. Even the orientation of the entire structure had to be precisely calculated by court astrologers so that it faced the most auspicious direction. Everything you are doing now is standard practice. The problem is, where is the money supposed to come from? Historians have long explored how much of the cost of such projects was directly subsidized by the royal treasury, and how much was expected to be borne by the elephant's guardian, that is, by you. The records are not clear. That ambiguity may itself suggest that the answer varied case by case, depending on the king's mood and how he intended to test you. As you watch the laborers on the site, drenched in sweat, and then look at the fortune draining rapidly from your account books, a sense of absurdity rises within you. In name, you are the elephant's master. In reality, you have become its first and highest servant. Its comfort and status now dictate your actions and consume your resources. You even begin to suspect that the house you will one day move into may be far less luxurious than the palace you are building for it. At this moment, the relation between master and servant has quietly reversed. And before the elephant palace is even completed, another enormous expense arrives. You must provide the elephant with a large full-time service staff. And the salaries, lodging, and meals for every member of that staff must be paid by you. You quickly realize that this is not simply a matter of hiring a few stable hands to clean the stall and bring fodder. By court standards, the attendants of a sacred white elephant are comparable to the retinue of a high-ranking aristocrat. First, you need a dedicated kitchen staff whose sole job is to prepare the elephant's 3 daily meals. The menu leaves you speechless. Top-grade sugar cane, the freshest tropical fruits, specially prepared rice cakes mixed with herbs and honey. It is said that before these foods are given to the elephant, they must first be offered before a Buddha image, passing through a full religious ritual. Sometimes, the food must even be served on large trays made of bronze or pure silver. Then you need several of the most experienced elephant handlers, responsible for the animal's daily routine and for soothing its moods. You need a private guard detachment to protect the elephant palace 24 hours a day. You need court-appointed veterinarians to come regularly and examine its health. Naturally, the fees for these experts are substantial. What strikes you as most absurd of all is that you must even hire a small orchestra. At fixed times each day, musicians are required to perform soothing, elegant court music for the elephant. The theory is that sacred music helps refine the spirit of the holy beast and keeps it in a pleasant mood. You have now become a kind of miniature director of human resources, managing a staff of dozens. Not only must you pay their considerable wages, you must also deal with their endless petty quarrels. More exhausting still is an inescapable, deeply unsettling feeling. A significant number of these people are informants planted by other, more powerful nobles at court. They report their work to you, but at the same time they report your every move and every word you speak to their true masters. It feels like living inside an enormous transparent fishbowl. Your servants are not merely your employees, they are extensions of the court's surveillance network. What later philosophers would call the panopticon is perfectly embodied here. You do not know when you are being watched, so you must assume that you are always being watched. Any small lapse in your care of the elephant can be magnified without limit and turned into a weapon for your enemies. Wealth has not bought you privacy. It has completely obliterated it. Historians have also discussed the internal dynamics of this service staff. To whom are they truly loyal? To you, their direct superior? Or is their primary allegiance always to the king or to the powerful patrons who place them at your side? The answer seems obvious. In name, you are their master. In reality, you and they alike are merely playing different roles in the same vast power system. None of you truly free. You are now a newly elevated figure at court, bearing a resonant title and with a mansion under construction. You begin to receive invitations to all kinds of court banquets and ceremonies. But you quickly discover that entering this world is far more difficult than finding your way through the jungle. The first time you put on your elaborate noble attire, you feel like a puppet operated by strings. You do not know where to put your hands or feet. When you enter the banquet hall, you are surrounded by elegantly dressed hereditary nobles, the country's true ruling class, whose families have entrenched themselves here for centuries. And you, just a few months ago, you were still a muddy peasant from the countryside. They come over to you wearing perfectly polished smiles, but the smiles never reach their eyes. They congratulate you on your good fortune, but in their mouths the phrase good fortune always carries a faint undertone of contempt, as though reminding you that everything you possess is merely luck. I hear the palace you are building for the sacred elephant is more splendid than my own main hall, one minister says over his wine, seemingly in passing. You cannot tell whether this is praise or a hint that you are extravagant and lacking in proper restraint. When you approach a small group of nobles deep in conversation, their topic abruptly stops. They nod to you politely, then begin discussing something bland and irrelevant in an affected register, thick with foreign vocabulary you cannot follow. You are politely excluded. In their eyes, you are merely an upstart who got lucky. At one important ceremony, because of a tiny mistake, you use a commoner's word in an inappropriate setting. A high priest corrects you coolly in public. The entire hall falls silent at once, and every eye turns toward you. Your face burns scarlet, and you want the floor to split open and swallow you whole. Only then do you truly understand that social survival here is an ordeal as precarious as walking on thin ice. The Ayutthayan court is notorious for its ferocious factionalism. The great families, swollen with power, struggle against one another for the king's favor and for tangible interests, resorting to every means available. And you, a newcomer, with no roots in this world, yet suddenly tied directly to the king's fortune, through a single elephant naturally become an unstable factor in the eyes of all factions. A potential threat. The complexity of court etiquette is almost obscene. How you walk, how you sit, how you speak, even where you place your hands all are strictly regulated according to the rank of the person before you. One mistake may be seen at best as ignorance at worst. It may be interpreted as disrespect or even a sign of rebelliousness. Historians often debate how much social mobility actually existed in a society like Ayutthaya. Could a commoner truly rise through some extraordinary twist of fate and become integrated into the nobility? Or would such a person forever bear the mark of outsider tolerated, but never accepted? From your own experience, the latter seems far more likely. You gradually come to understand that these so-called customs and rituals are not merely traditions. They are weapons used by the insiders of this world to preserve their position. By constructing a complicated system of unwritten rules that outsiders can scarcely master, they can effortlessly identify and isolate intruders like you. Your crime is not your behavior itself, it is your birth. This social game was unfair from the moment it began. Yet you were forced onto the table all the same. At last, during a grand celebration, the moment arrives that makes everything clear. To display his supreme merit, the king decides to hold a formal naming ceremony for the white elephant and bestow upon it a royal title. The entire capital pours into the streets to witness the spectacle. You are dressed in your finest ceremonial robes. leading the white elephant, equally decked out in glittering ornaments, slowly through the center of the crowd's acclamation. Its body is draped in jewel-studded silk, and its tusks are fitted with golden rings. You see the eyes of the people lining the streets gleaming with fervor and worship. They kneel to the elephant, crying out words of praise. But you, standing at the very heart of this glory, feel a sense of estrangement unlike anything you have ever known. You lead the elephant onto a temporary platform where the king is already waiting. He does not look at you. His gaze passes over you and falls upon the tens of thousands of subjects below. Then he begins to speak in a ringing, deeply stirring voice. He links the appearance of this white elephant to a recent military victory and to this year's abundant harvest brought by favorable weather. With total clarity, he uses the elephant as living proof that heaven has chosen him. "Behold," he cries, raising his arm through this sacred gift. "Heaven shows us all that my rule is just, and blessed by the gods and the Buddha." The crowd erupts in thunderous cheers, and in that instant, as you watch how expertly the king manipulates the emotions of the masses, you suddenly understand everything. Perhaps this elephant is not in itself all that sacred. It is sacred because the king says it is sacred. All of its meaning and power derive entirely from royal authority. It is not the cause. It is merely proof of the result. And you, like the elephant, are only a prop. You are the two most important props on the king's vast political stage, the tools through which he displays his legitimacy to the world. Your role is to discover the miracle. The elephant's role is to become the miracle. The king's role is to interpret that miracle in the end, and to harvest all the political benefit from it. Historically, the monarchs of Ayutthaya, especially in periods of instability or after coming to the throne by irregular means, were deeply fond of recording every auspicious omen in their official chronicles and proclamations, particularly the acquisition of white elephants. This was political propaganda of the highest importance. The names bestowed on such elephants were often extravagantly grand, long, sonorous, heavy with references to mythology, cosmology, and the king's own glorious deeds. An elephant might be named something like Jewel of the great king's victory. As you look at the white elephant being worshipped by the crowd, it stands there quietly, ignorant of everything around it. A tremendous sadness suddenly overwhelms you for it, and for yourself. Both of you have been swept into a game you can neither understand nor control, turned into vessels for an enormous symbol. As for the monarchs of that age, historians have long argued over whether they truly believed they possessed a divinely sanctioned right to such beasts, or whether all of it was merely cold, meticulously calculated realpolitik. Did they genuinely believe in these omens, or were they merely exploiting the faith of their subjects? Looking at the radiant king on the platform, you feel the answer may well be both. But for you, something else matters more. You now see clearly that the king needs the elephant to symbolize his legitimacy, and the elephant needs the king to confer sacred status upon it. Without the king's recognition, it is only an ordinary elephant with unusually pale skin. This is a system in which power and symbol depend on one another, coexisting and mutually reinforcing each other. And you are the unluckiest middle link in that entire system, the one who bears all the practical, tedious burden, while the king reaps all the glory and benefit. You thought that being a royal pawn, shouldering endless expenses and social strain, was the worst this extraordinary run of fortune could bring you. You were wrong again. This white elephant, symbol of peace, prosperity, and sacred blessing, ultimately becomes the fuse that ignites a war. That may be the greatest irony of your life. The atmosphere at court begins to change quietly. At banquets, the nobles no longer whisper about whose garden is finer, but about tension on the frontier. a powerful neighboring kingdom in historical terms. This would usually mean Burma's Tungu dynasty has become increasingly provocative. Their envoys arrive in Ayutthaya with an arrogant and insulting demand. News of it spreads at once, sending the whole court into uproar. The neighboring king claims that he possesses greater merit, greater Barami, in Buddhist terms, than the king of Ayutthaya. Therefore, he demands that Ayutthaya's king present this sacred white elephant to him as tribute. Of course, this is not simply about wanting an elephant. It is a carefully calculated, naked humiliation in that age, when the idea of divinely sanctioned kingship ran deep. The number and quality of white elephants were treated as hard evidence of whether a monarch's rule was just and whether a state was strong. To hand over a white elephant was to admit that one's virtue was insufficient, one's realm weak, and one's submission willing. Your king, the God King, naturally cannot agree to that. He refuses the envoys in harsh terms, and that is exactly what the other side wanted. This pretext is what they were waiting for. The shadow of war swiftly descends over the kingdom. The capital transforms almost overnight from a city of pleasure into a city on a wartime footing. Conscription is ordered, young men are gathered and drafted into the army, supplies are seized in great quantities and sent to the front. Only a few months earlier the kingdom had celebrated the arrival of the white elephant. Now that atmosphere is replaced by heaviness and fear. Walking through the streets, you can feel the pressure in the air like a coming storm. And what suffocates you most is the rumor that begins to spread. In corners of the court, in tea houses and marketplaces, people whisper that this war has been brought on by the white elephant. That country bumpkin who found the elephant brought disaster on us. You realize that you have changed from someone who brought good luck into someone who brought war. The weight of thousands upon thousands of lives seems suddenly to have been laid across your shoulders. That discovery in the jungle, that blessing that once raised you up overnight has now, beyond any doubt, turned into the most vicious curse imaginable. In the 16th century, the wars between Siam and Burma were indeed described by later historians, especially Western scholars, as the White Elephant War. At the time, Ayutthaya's king, Maha Chakravat, possessed several white elephants, provoking great jealousy from the Burmese king Tabinchwadi and his successor Bayenong, who ultimately used this as a pretext for large-scale invasion. Historians still fiercely debate the real causes of those wars. Was the white elephant truly the fuse a holy war concerning religion and national honor? Or was it merely a more elevated, more respectable excuse for conflict, whose real substance was still the struggle for trade routes, land, and population? But for you, living then, such scholarly inquiry means nothing. You know only that one quiet afternoon in the jungle, one private and innocent discovery, after being fermented by power and transformed by interstate rivalry, has escalated into an international conflict. A symbol can possess such immense destructive force. You witness with your own eyes how an emblem can shift from something that binds a society inwardly together into the explosive charge that detonates outward conflict. Time passes silently. Years, perhaps more than a decade, go by. Wars break out and then pause, while life continues in a state of chronic anxiety. You are no longer the newcomer at court, but neither do you ever truly become one of them. You are merely a functional presence, a living monument. The initial excitement brought by this heaven-sent wealth has long since disappeared, replaced by a deep, bone-weary exhaustion. You were trapped one day. Someone from your old village finally manages to find you in the capital. Perhaps he is your childhood playmate, perhaps a distant relative. He sits stiffly in the lavish reception hall of your house, not knowing where to put his hands. You order the finest refreshments to be served, but he only sips them timidly in small mouthfuls. An unbridgeable gulf now lies between you. He tells you the news from the village, whose buffalo has calved, how the rice harvest is going this year. The headman's granddaughter has married a young man from the neighboring village. These are the textures of the life you once knew intimately. Yet now they sound like stories from another world. You discover that you can no longer truly take part in such conversations. Your life is filled with the heavy things of court, ritual, expense, and intrigue. And he too is cowed by the invisible aura of importance surrounding you, not daring to say too much. After he leaves, you pace alone in your vast, luxurious residence. This house is less a home than an exquisitely appointed prison. The priceless antiques and decorations mean nothing to you. The obsequious servants all feel like watchers. The endless court obligations are a nightmare that will not leave you. How long has it been since you ate with your feet in the dirt? How long since you laughed freely, without restraint? Late at night, unable to sleep, you go again to the elephant palace. The white elephant has aged somewhat, but it is still calm. It is slowly chewing its nighttime feed, and you stand quietly behind the railing watching it. Suddenly you want to ask it, do you feel trapped too? Do you miss the freedom of the jungle? You think back to the afternoon when you found it. If, in that moment, you had turned and run, pretending you had seen nothing, what would your life have been? You probably would have spent your whole life in that small village, poor but simple, married, raised children, and grown old. You would have had real joys and sorrows, friends you could speak your heart to, an identity that was truly your own. Was any of this worth it? What you gained was nominal wealth and status. What you lost was freedom, real communal belonging, inner peace, and, above all, yourself. You realize that true poverty may not be a lack of material goods at all, but the loss of autonomy and authenticity. Your story becomes a sad prophecy about the meaning of real wealth. Historians rarely find personal records left by ordinary people of that era. But logically speaking, the immense psychological pressure of holding high position at court must have been real. Burnout is a modern term, but the feeling itself surely is not. At the heart of Thai culture, there is a concept often rendered as krang jai, a state of mind defined by not wanting to trouble others, not wanting to offend others, by extreme consideration and self-restraint. In a rigidly stratified court, that mentality is amplified without limit, leaving you in a constant state of anxiety, afraid of making mistakes, afraid of offending superiors. And on a deeper philosophical level, one may ask whether, in Ayutthayan culture, there even existed a concept of personal happiness independent of social duty and class position, or whether personal identity was already wholly consumed by one's role in the hierarchy. Looking at the quiet white elephant in its enclosure, you feel as though you yourself are the answer. Just when you think life will continue forever in this numb calm, the thing you fear most happens. The white elephant, source of all your wealth, your rank, your glory, and your pain, symbol of the kingdom's prosperity, begins to fall ill. It starts with something very small. One morning, it refuses the breakfast the cooks have carefully prepared. This has never happened before. It seems listless, and its eyes have dimmed. That tiny change strikes your heart like a current of electricity, filling you with a cold, pure fear. At once, you summon the best veterinarians and priests in the kingdom. They come and gather around the elephant, their expressions grave. They examine its body, they conduct all manner of rituals to ward off evil, and pray for blessing. They feed it bitter, herbal pasties, while murmuring incantations. But the busier they become, the more tightly their brows knit, and the lower your heart sinks. The news quickly reaches the palace. A few days later, the king himself comes in person to your elephant palace. His arrival brings no comfort. It only imposes a suffocating pressure. He stands there, silent, looking at the ailing white elephant with a dark expression. You kneel behind him, hardly daring to breathe. You know perfectly well that if this white elephant dies, the king's wrath could burn you to nothing. Your failure in duty would be treated as the gravest possible offense against the king and against the entire kingdom. The news of the elephant's illness spreads through the capital like a plague. Everyone sees it as a terrifying omen. The health of one animal has now risen into a matter of national security. People believe heaven is warning the king that his merit may be failing. Your personal failure will be interpreted as a national catastrophe. Historically, the death of a royal white elephant was an event of enormous significance. The honors accorded to it and the scale of its funeral were equivalent to those for the highest-ranking royal personages, and the entire kingdom was expected to observe official mourning. In some cases, all court ministers were required to shave their heads and wear white mourning garments to signify grief. Scholars and anthropologists have offered different interpretations of such omens. Was an ailing white elephant taken as evidence that the king's merit was waning, or as a test of that merit? If the king could mobilize all the kingdom's medical and spiritual resources and ultimately heal the elephant, that too could serve as renewed proof of his strength and heavenly mandate. But you have no mind left for such questions. You know only this. Your entire world, everything you have built over the past decade or more, your rank, your wealth, your apparently splendid life, rests upon the fragile heartbeat of this aging animal. The kingdom is built on a symbolic economy founded on omens and signs. That system is far more fragile than anyone imagines. When cold, brutal physical reality, aging, sickness, death descends, the entire edifice built on an abstract belief can collapse in an instant. And in the end, it dies. On a sweltering afternoon, it quietly lies down on its silk-covered couch. Its breathing grows weaker and weaker. And then, under your gaze, it stops entirely. There is no struggle, no cry. Everything is astonishingly peaceful. What follows, however, is anything but peaceful. The royal court holds a funeral for it of immense grandeur and sorrow. Its body is wrapped in white cloth and escorted by hundreds of guards and monks to be cremated. As its former guardian, you are one of the central figures in the ceremony. Dressed in white mourning robes, you walk numbly at the front of the funeral procession, feeling like a ghost. After the funeral, you are summoned by the king. You expect death, or at least exile. But to your surprise, the king merely looks at you coldly and dismisses you without a word. You are not executed, but you are stripped of the core function that gave your life meaning. You are permitted to retain your noble title and part of your land, but you are pushed completely to the margin. You are no longer required to attend court meetings. No one invites you to banquets anymore. You become a living but obsolete relic, an ill-omened symbol belonging to some bygone age. Overnight, you are flung from the center of the whirlpool of power to its farthest edge. The years that follow are long and empty. You grow old, living quietly and alone in that vast house in the capital. You watch new favorites rise, watch new auspicious signs be discovered, watch the court's endless factional struggles continue without rest. None of it has anything to do with you anymore. You possess a noble title, you possess a grand house, but the inner core that once sustained it all is gone. Your life has become a long, splendid emptiness. In Thai Buddhist ideas of karma, of karmic consequence, there are good deeds and bad deeds, good karma and bad karma. The arrival of the white elephant is seen as a manifestation of the immense good karma of both you and the king. Its death, accordingly, is interpreted as the exhaustion of that good karma. Within that spiritual logic, your decline in status becomes the natural result. It is said that after a royal white elephant was cremated, its remains, especially the skull and tusks, would be collected and enshrined in specially built stupas, like the relics of a saint. As for the guardians who lost the white elephants under their care, historians disagree about what became of them. Though execution for obvious negligence was certainly possible, the more common view is that they were usually retired and marginalized, because their symbolic significance had expired. Punishing them too harshly would only remind people of the unlucky event. Their fate was more often a matter of political calculation than simple reward and punishment. You survive, but you survive more alone than anyone. You outlive your mission. The whole meaning of your adult life had been tied to another living being, and that being is now gone. You are no longer the guardian of the white elephant. You have become again an ordinary person, but you can never truly go back. You can never become that mushroom-gathering youth in the jungle again. You are trapped in the fissure between two lives, belonging fully to neither. Your personal story is drawing quietly toward its end, but what you do not expect is that you will live long enough to witness the ending of an even greater story, the fall of the kingdom of Ayutthaya itself. Time fast forwards to 1767. You are now a frail old man, almost forgotten, but still alive long enough to witness the final war of annihilation. The armies of Burma's Khanbaum dynasty once again besiege this great capital on an unprecedented scale. This time Ayutthaya does not escape. You do not see the slaughter on the battlefield with your own eyes, but you see what the war does to the city. As the siege drags on, food runs out, famine and plague spread. Every day you see black smoke rising into the sky from different parts of the city, where shells have struck temples and houses and set them ablaze. The air is full of the smell of burning and of despair. In the end, the city falls. You hide in your ruined house, listening to the cries and the sounds of killing outside. Those resplendent golden towers you first saw when you entered the capital as a young man are now blackened and collapsing one after another in the flames. Those magnificent palaces you once entered and left in awe are looted bare. The world you once both longed for and suffered under is being destroyed completely. The Ayutthaya kingdom, which had endured for 417 years, has reached its end. Countless works of art, books, and official archives vanish forever in the catastrophe. Through a crack in your window, you see a pair of Burmese soldiers swaggering through the shattered streets, leading away several surviving royal elephants. These animals, once symbols of the kingdom's glory and sanctity, have now become the enemy's proudest trophies. It is the ultimate humiliation of a kingdom already destroyed. And here, amid the ruins of this great city, your story comes to an end. Your personal fate, from a chance discovery in the jungle to meteoric elevation, to bearing the crushing burden of that glory, and finally to declining into solitude, seems like a miniature reflection of the fate of Ayutthaya itself. The kingdom, too, had once enjoyed its golden age, just as your discovery once heralded a peak of power. It too had once stood mighty, feared in all directions, just as your own rise did. It too drew endless internal and external conflict because of its strength, just as you drew burdens you could not bear. And in the end it too suffered a tragic, irreversible collapse. Historians still analyze the deep causes of Ayutthaya's fall. Was it internal political corruption and factional struggle? Burma's superior military strength? Failures of leadership? Or some combination of all these things? Whatever the answer, the loss of the kingdom's sacred symbols, including white elephants, is widely regarded as one crucial sign of the collapse. Your personal experience is like a fractal pattern, reproducing in miniature the grand historical arc of the civilization to which you belonged. What is interesting is that after this great destruction, the new dynasty founded by King Taksin, and later the Chakri dynasty in Bangkok, both treated the search for new white elephants as a matter of vital importance. They needed to show the world that sacred blessing had not abandoned the people of this land, but had merely been reborn under a new monarchy, one supposedly more virtuous. History is always circling back on itself. Your story, the story of a lost villager and a white elephant, seems to have been buried in the dust of history, together with the ruins of Ayutthaya. But strangely, it survived in another form and crossed the seas into a language wholly unfamiliar to you. In the centuries that followed, as more and more Westerners came to Siam, that is, Thailand, they heard stories of the sacred white elephant. They heard how these animals were treasured by kings, how immense sums had to be spent to maintain them, how they had palaces and servants of their own. And then a half-true legend began to circulate that if an ancient Siamese king was displeased with a courtier and wanted to ruin him quietly, he would give him a white elephant. The poor courtier could not refuse a gift from the king, nor dare show any neglect towards such a sacred creature. He could only pour his entire fortune into building an elephant palace, hiring servants, and purchasing expensive food, until at last he was dragged down by the sacred gift itself. That story captures the essence of your entire life with eerie precision. And so, a white elephant, in the English-speaking world. That phrase gradually evolved into a household idiom, used to describe something that appears costly and magnificent, but in reality is ruinously expensive to maintain, practically useless, and liable to become a tremendous burden. Today, people use white elephant to describe a stadium that lies idle after the Olympics, but still costs vast sums to maintain every year. They use it to describe a highly sophisticated machine whose maintenance and repair costs are absurdly high. They use it to describe a gift that leaves you trapped. Accept it, and it comes with obligations and responsibilities you never wanted. Refuse it, and you wound the giver's feelings. Every time people use this expression, they are unconsciously repeating your story. They may know nothing of Ayutthaya, nothing of God Kings, nothing of the elephant palace you built with your own hands that was more luxurious than your own home. Nothing of the sleepless nights you spent worrying how to pay the musicians' wages. But they understand the feeling of being kidnapped by a stroke of luck, dragged down by a gift of wealth. Your experience has become a metaphor for a universal human predicament. As for the exact origin of the idiom, linguists and historians still argue about it. Did kings really use white elephants deliberately to punish ministers, or was that detail later embellished by Western storytellers to make the tale more dramatic? We may never know for certain. But in modern Thailand, white elephants are still regarded as sacred animals, property of the monarch, carefully tended by the bureau of the royal household. The tradition continues, though the context is now entirely different. And you, the person who once got lost in the jungle while gathering mushrooms your entire life, that long and complicated journey full of awe, fear, duty, glory, and regret, has finally been compressed into a simple metaphor of only 2 words. Your suffering has become a story very useful to later generations. That is the power of language. It can take a concrete cultural experience rooted in a specific time and place, and transform it into a universal concept that crosses eras and boundaries, resonating with people from countless different backgrounds. And now the story of that expression is over as well. Are your eyelids growing heavy too? You can almost feel the figures from the story, the king, the nobles, the priests, and you slowly fading away like ink dispersing in water. That golden capital, that quiet white elephant, are beginning to blur as well, dissolving into your own dreams. You are no longer the one who lived through the story. You are only a traveler listening from afar, and at the end of the journey lies a warm, peaceful darkness where all the weight and clamor of history melt into the most distant background sound of your lullaby.